I'd like to call to order the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District July board meeting taking place in June. First order of business, can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving forward on the consent agenda. These are to be approved all in a motion. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so discussion, any discussions on the consent agenda?
I think you just voted on
You
it.
just passed it.
I apologize. Is it right? Isn't there a further discussion?
Before they vote.
Yeah, I messed that up. I messed it. Okay. Can I just say one comment about one of them?
Yep.
On the Battle Creek, I assume that it's going to come with signage and labeling just to support education.
Page signage, Battle Creek Middle School, retrofit projects.
Yes, for the stewardship grant portion, we'll have signage for the project area.
Perfect. That's really that's what I wanted to just double check on. I didn't see it called out, but I assumed. Okay. Well, today's a unique day, right? We have visitor comments, and this is going to be separate from the public hearing, right?
Yes, and I think we do have some visitors. Well, we have a visitor, and then we have some new staff that are online too. If we could take this time to have them introduce themselves.
Love that.
Good with that. Let's start with staff, and then we'll get to Ann too. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. This is Paul Erdman. Just joined the Watershed District this week on Monday as the Natural Resource Program Manager. Happy to be aboard. I interned at the Watershed District in 2006, 2007, so made a complete circle and really happy to be back again and to be working with a great staff and team.
Welcome aboard, Paul.
Thank you.
We're excited to have him here with us again. Time flies though, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. And then Pat Williamson as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pat. I'm the Natural Resources Specialist. I came on a couple weeks ago. Like Paul, I was also an intern in 2018 and 2019, and I've partnered with Ramsey-Washington while working with other agencies, and I'm really excited to work with the staff, work on these restorations again. I'm really excited.
Two people to replace Bill. That makes a lot of sense. That's good.
Yeah, it's a good team now.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
He always has some of the best write-ups, Pat and Paul, so excited to see what y'all do.
I told him that you guys always really like the natural resources reports. It's always just feel good, nice, good pictures. So. Great. Nick, have you introduced yourself to the board before?
No, this is my first board meeting. Just here just to see what's up and just check it out and see what goes on. So nice to meet you all.
And Nick is our water quality intern.
Yeah, I'm the water quality intern for this year. So yes.
Thanks, Nick.
So we should expect him full employment in 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And then Ann, you want to introduce yourself?
Great. Ann Sawyer. I'm with the Board of Water and Soil Resources. I'm the board commissioner for the Dakota Scott County. So I started in October of last year, and I've been trying to make the board meetings, but I'm a little slow getting there. I apologize for that. Home for me is in Northfield, actually. And it's funny because I know Paul just came from Bowser, and I did not meet him there. Hi, Paul. So anyways, my background is from the University of Minnesota Extension, so I feel very strongly about engagement in outreach and education, but I'm definitely learning the ropes with local governments and how they all work as part of their grants and grant management processes, and just the awesome projects that they do. My background is in soil health and soil science and watershed science, but urban stuff is really new to me, so I appreciate everything that I'm learning from folks I'm working with, and I feel so lucky to have the folks that I get, because I think Dakota Scott and Ramsey are like the counties. So. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'm excited to just listen in and be a fan of all.
Oh, awesome. Nice to meet you.
Right.
Perfect. So visitor comments, I think we've met all the visitors. Can you help me with the public hearing? I don't think there's a motion here, but we are holding a public hearing for the permit
Yeah.
rules that were released.
So you will have to open, Lauren, you're gonna help me too. You'll open the public hearing. Ask if anyone is here to speak to the rule revision for the public hearing and then close it. And then there is nobody here, as far as I know, no one's here to, but you'll still need to go through that process.
Okay. So then, let's see, Lauren, correct me if that's it. So I'm going to open public hearing for the 2023 permit rule revisions. I'm going to ask anyone who's here to comment on it.
Hearing none, then you can just
Hearing
close
none.
it right now. You can just close it. Yeah.
Yes.
So I will go ahead and close the public hearing for the 2023 permit rule revision. What happens if somebody comes in, just out of curiosity?
You could open it again and offer them. So.
Okay.
There another opportunity at the end of the 45-day review?
Well, they can always come.
They can always comment.
Yeah, they can always comment. So the, Nicole, the review goes through July 24th. Is that correct? The public comment period.
Yes. Yep.
So they can.
And at that time, we'll get together with the other watershed districts, prepare responses to comments. And if additional clarifications needed from folks making those comments, written or at Cap Region's holding a public hearing tonight as well, then we can do that at that time. But everyone who submits a comment will see their comment in the response to comments.
And you anticipate having that in the August board packet, is that correct?
You know, we don't know how many comments we're going to get, so we don't know how long it'll take to prepare responses and or make changes, you know, if any of the comments result in changes. So I'm not going to promise that, but we certainly don't want to stretch this out too much longer. So.
Okay.
Have you received comments thus far? Can you share that?
Not that I know of. We did receive a number of comments during our first round of informal comments in February to March. So a lot of people like to wait till the last day though. So you never know.
I am guilty of that at work.
Yeah.
A lot of humans out there.
Awesome. So let's go toward the permit programs. I believe we have one application. And Nicole, do you mind walking us through? I think it's permit
Yes.
20.
Yeah. So this project is taking place at a, oh, my dog has impeccable timing. I apologize. Taking place at an industrial facility located down by the Mississippi River. And it's, as I understand it, no longer operational, but it was steel manufacturing. It is a wetland restoration project. Over time, there's been deposition of slag waste material from their operations. And when I say over time, I think a long time, but I'm not sure. So they're proposing now to pull all that material out, restore the existing wetland, and then actually expand onto the what's now delineated as wetland, and establish an associated upland buffer. That will, however, take a variance because our rules are specifying no disturb. So you'll see a variance enclosed with this permit application, which is also why it wasn't on the consent agenda. So if there's any questions about this project, I'd be happy to answer them. Fire at will.
Yeah, I guess I get a couple questions. I was curious, the interaction between this wetland that has been more or less spilled over time with Fish Creek. I think that some of the materials in the application make note that there is no disturbance to the Fish Creek corridor.
Right.
But I'm the way that the map laid, or the map suggests that Fish Creek would flow right adjacent to this area. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious what that interaction is. And potentially, are there some things that might be done to improve the lower end of Fish Creek? Rather than just say- Go ahead.
Yeah, so the project limits that are noted on the map more so reflect property boundaries a little bit. It's not, I don't think it's reaching that far north. So there are no impacts proposed to Fish Creek, but it does look like Fish Creek is hydrologically connected to that wetland and to Eagle Lake. It's like a fringe wetland of Eagle Lake. So there's no work being proposed in Fish Creek nor improvements to Fish Creek. It's kind of the southern edge of this wetland area on the Jerdao property, spilling into the Jerdao property,
And
as I understand it.
And the way the application was presented, it's described as a voluntary action. There's not a regulatory constraint associated with it. Do we know, have there been, I'll just say, pressures from anybody, either agencies or private citizens, other interests, that this be done? Or is the owner just realizing, gee, over time, something happened, we really should do a restoration? And then I guess the last question, has there been any, I guess, if it had been a wetland that had filled in over time, there's not much opportunity for banking. Banking has not been brought into the conversation at all, has it?
Correct.
So that's not.
Yeah, and to say that again.
That's not any, that has no incentive play in their action.
To my knowledge, they've not requested to bank anything. Certainly not with us, and not with the city of St. Paul. As far as I'm aware, they're the WACA LGU. To address your other question, I don't know the origin conversations about this project and this issue, when that occurred between, I imagine, Jerdao and St. Paul Parks, or just the city of St. Paul, because that slag does intrude onto Parks property. So I don't know the original basis nor when this kind of idea started. I don't know if Brandon would know, because Barr also was working with Jerdao on this. Otherwise, that's something I can get back to you on, but to my knowledge, there's been no formal enforcement regarding this slag.
I don't know the origin of this. Permits that come to us for review, I make sure I don't interact with that team other than telling them, helping them through the process of what's required. So I don't know the origin story there. And through the review process, Nicole and I didn't discuss what the impetus was for completing the project.
Yeah, and I was on the wetland delineation review last fall, and it was, we're gonna, do these improvements and it's exciting, but we didn't talk about, there might have been more to the story, but I don't know.
But I don't know that it would be consequential to the permit.
To the
itself,
permit,
yeah.
right.
No, this is what staff believes is a benefit to the property and over existing conditions. The variance request is necessary, like I said, because of the no disturb specifications in our rules. So not granting the variance would, not allow this project or this restoration to move forward.
I wanted to make a comment in this. I had a couple of questions on it, but huge fan of the doing more for the wetlands. So I like everything that I've read so far. I was curious about slag material. I don't know anything about, is it a toxic material? Do we have to take more precautions when we remove that material? I didn't see anything special, specifically called out in the permit. I assume that there's nothing special they have to do for slag. Is that a correct assumption?
That's my understanding, yeah, that it's a non-hazardous. It looks and feels like gravel. And it would be removed from the wetland, deposited upland and out of the floodplain. I imagine, I'm not sure what their plan is for storage. They might be restoring vegetation further upland as well. Or they might just be storing it and waiting for possible redevelopment options. And at that point, they might make a decision about what to do with it. But as I understand it, it's non-hazardous.
And my last question is, and not to sound greedy, and I apologize, but when we've been talking about wetland restoration, is there more that could be done on this particular site for the future for us to consider? Out of curiosity.
The district has not looked at restoration potential on this site. They are effectively restoring more wetland than is out there now.
Oh yeah, totally with that. Like I said, I didn't want to sound a little bit greedy, but I was just curious.
Yeah. I do know, I believe that this site would be up for redevelopment in the future. So I'm not sure that they're, you know, it's a very small portion that's on St. Paul Park's property. Otherwise it's private property currently owned by Jordow. And I don't know their future plans.
We did do a restoration site search last year, and there's a report that we're going to bring back to you all next month, I think. We wouldn't have looked at private property, but we could see if there was anything identified on the St. Paul Parks.
Yeah, I drove by and there's lots of pretty area over there.
Yeah.
I don't really have any other further questions. It's increasing the wetland and it looks like overall net benefit. So
I have one more question. I found it in the packet. Scrolling through, they are proposing to, following removal of the slag, to reseed with MnDOT seed mixes. And I'm more familiar with the Bowser seed mixes. What's the interaction between Bowser and MnDOT? And I guess maybe more specifically, why wouldn't they have proposed a Bowser seed mix? Do we have any insights there?
I've seen Bowser mixes specified before, but I more often see MnDOT seed mixes specified, and I don't know the reason for that.
Yeah. Have you looked at the mix? I'm not going to ask you to kind of recite it here, but is it, you know, all native species and typical of this type of habitat? Do you have a sense for that?
Yeah, I'm scrolling. There was a plan sheet included in the board packet, the landscaping plan that I thought.
Yeah, it says.
Oh, it just says the seed mix.
Seed mix 34-261, providing cover of native grasses, sedges, rushes, and forbs. I don't know.
I was going to ask, you know, if Bowser actually follows the MnDOT seed mixes, because the MnDOT seed mixes are prescriptive and it's not an exact, like it's this species, this species, this species. It must contain so many % of rushes, sedges, depending if you're doing prairie mix, wetland mix. So I don't know if Bowser actually conforms to MnDOT. I don't know that either.
But they are native.
But they are native.
Natives.
Yeah. Trying to see if there's another plan sheet that I just might not have included that has more.
Yeah, I was going to ask if Paul is still there. I don't see him. Well, yeah, there he is. Paul, do you know?
Yeah, I am here. It's two separate things. Bowser has their own state seed mixes, and MnDOT I just worked on that process actually before I left Bowser, and we tried to get MnDOT to play along with our seed mixes there. So there was just Minnesota State seed mixes, but they wanted to keep their own mixes. And in general, it's a matter of cost. The MnDOT mixes are generally lower cost than the Bowser mixes.
I guess we'll probably vote on the permit itself, but just as if I could make the suggestion for future projects, you know, if staff have the opportunity in meetings and they see a MnDOT seed mix, could you at least ask why not using Bowser seed mix, or kind of, you know, raise that issue? We may not be able to get anywhere, but if we just ignore it, we're not going to get anywhere. I think we'll get further if we, because I have looked at the Bowser seed mixes. I have more familiarity with them. Paul, you could certainly say more. And I think they have been vetted and have a lot more interest in some of the restoration and longer term beneficial outcomes, where I think, probably shouldn't say this, but I will make this speculative guess. I don't know, but MnDOT may be, yeah, native, but their primary interest is going to be on stabilization and not necessarily a habitat.
They will have a special contractor to do this work. Kind of not your typical construction project seeder, but it's not too late for me to bring that up for this project, not just for future projects. These are not final plans. I should mention that our rules obviously don't specify specific seed mixes, so it's just a recommendation, but I can certainly pass that along to the permit applicant, or at least, you know, ask if Bowser seed mixes were considered. So I can certainly do that.
Okay.
We can still pass the permit with that being related
Yep.
to them. Nicole,
Yeah,
correct?
because you couldn't base your decision on the
Oh,
permit.
I just wanted to double check.
Yeah.
And just to clarify here, I'm able to bring up the MnDOT seed mix, and it says it's native for riparian areas, floodplain areas, and used for wetland mitigation. It is a MnDOT mix, so of course the MnDOT typically uses it in areas where there's culvert or bridge work.
Sure.
So as we're going through and reviewing it, we are checking for native, and it looks like there's 24 or so different varieties as part of that mix. But as Nicole said, we can follow up and ask the reason, the basis why, and make suggestions.
And then I was just curious with the placement of an additional 12 inches of topsoil, if there's any, and there's going to be, I'm sure, heavy machinery here, if they're doing any additional soil decompaction to ensure the success of this restoration.
I think that's specified, but I can double check.
Should double check on that. Again, we don't specify in our rules any particular construction methods, so it's, but you can check.
Okay, any further questions or discussions on the permit 2320? Do I have a motion to approve 2320?
I will move that we approve 2320.
Second that. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did you guys wish to hear back from the feedback from the back and forth?
Sure.
That's awesome. Okay.
Thanks.
Hey,
On that note, I can provide feedback from last meeting that was requested. I already answered, I think, Ben's question about City of Maplewood buffers when we met earlier this week. But Mark, I know you had a comment about the Hillside Park wetland sediment delta. City of Maplewood did respond and said they have, as part of their core requirements, they are looking at their stormwater outfalls throughout the City of Maplewood. And they set aside funding to do routine maintenance on all wetlands and ponds that they're responsible for, and made sure to highlight that they partner with the district in our annual CIP maintenance. project and, asked to sign on for various ponds and wetlands while we're out doing that work. So they did say if the district wants them to look closer at hillside wetland for next year, they can. They didn't say that they would add it to their CIP, but if that's the direction that they're given, they can look at it.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Yeah, I'm not sure the best time to bring that up. Kind of sounds to me like they're looking for direction from us, and we're kind of looking for direction from them. We're caught a little bit in the middle, whether or not
I think,
Yeah,
just to
go ahead.
clarify, it wasn't identified as a priority on their end. So they're asking if it's a priority on our end that they'll look again, but they do their own prioritization. And they tell us what ponds they want to clean out on a year-to-year basis. So if that's the direction, I can continue that conversation with the city.
Well, so we have our own prioritization. Right.
BMPs.
So I mean, and
Right, and the city has something similar for theirs, so I think what the city's saying is they're inspecting and putting that into their systems, but it hasn't risen to the top of their priorities to do the maintenance.
Maybe I tuck
Yeah,
it
I think
away
they look at-
for a conversation as we're talking about priorities. that
well,
we-
that's kind of what I was thinking. Well, do we inspect any of their pond areas associated to this?
No, we wouldn't do their inspections for their MS4 permit. They would do that. Like Nicole said, when they do have their top priorities, they would come to us during our CIP maintenance and repair project and request that we add them to our plans.
And that happens in the fall, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay, so in the fall, we can come back as they've brought forward their proposals and priorities in question.
Is that an annual process?
Yeah, and they don't have to bring us, but we offer it to all of our cities to include those projects onto our contract and help manage that, and then they reimburse us for that work. So sometimes if they have the budget and they want us to do that, we will. It's not, we don't set that direction. It's just offered to them.
Okay, thank you.
So enforcement report. Nicole.
Yeah, let me know if you have any questions about our meetings or activities. Couple project updates, one from Mary and one from myself. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Another pretty dry month in the construction world.
I always enjoy the write-ups. I think you guys do a great job.
Good, thank you.
For describing what it is that you're running into out there.
And looking at it, it seems like with the dry month, some of the findings are fairly typical.
Yeah.
So transitioning to Paige and the stewardship grant program, I think you just have a budget update this time around.
Yeah, I don't have anything special to point out. I'll take questions. Yeah, we're approving a lot of projects. Our designers are finishing a lot of design work. A lot of people coming in with new interests. I may have said this last month, but contractors are pretty booked, so we're already telling people that they should plan for 2024 projects, but we will have a lot that get finished this year, and then a lot are from last year are wrapping up. So I think this dry weather has helped keep construction on track.
I don't have any questions on your budget. I'm curious if there's been any, well, I don't have any questions on the current budget, but on the public art area, do people know that that's available for grant funding? That started making me curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's posted on our website, and usually, I think this year, a couple of those are sign requests.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So if a city or a public project wants, or any project, I guess, is requesting signage, then I point them to that grant.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about as more schools engage the grant system, if there's other ways to get the students involved using this particular piece of the fund. And if we could approach it in that way. I always seem to recall students enjoy those types of projects and it brings attention appropriately.
Yeah, for sure.
Any questions for that?
Maintenance grants. There's been a few of them, and I think that's really great to see that people are taking advantage of that. I think that's really key to the success of these projects. So, good to see.
Just to add to that, so being somebody who has benefited from shoreline restoration is, it might be nice to revisit and share the maintenance again coming up, because I think for our area, it's another year, I believe, of maintenance as part of the plan, but then I don't think others are really fully understanding what it's going to take to maintain that area appropriately. So I know you've sent it out, Paige, as a resident. I appreciate that. I think just recalling it when it's time for the shoreline restoration to be discussed again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify, Val, this is the last year that we're maintaining it.
Yeah, my bad. I knew I was in a
Just so
year
you know.
range. Well, I
will, our plan for that, I mean, just so everybody knows too. So with our shoreline restorations, we have restoration on Snail, Twin, and Lake Owasso right now. So Twin is in its second year of maintenance, and doing a lot of, you're working with Landbridge Ecological. There's a lot of thistle issues and whatnot when we started this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Val, but the water levels had been fairly high. So there was a lot of weed seed that got brought in, not part of our project. It just got brought in, or awoken, I don't know, with whatever the water levels were doing. So we're dealing with that. We'll do a replanting shortly, and asking residents to water, and then a full replanting in the fall, or, filling in and taking care of those bare areas. And then our intent is to share the maintenance grant information with homeowners, as well as contractor information, so they can hire the current contractor or anyone they want. And then if anyone is interested in doing maintenance themselves, we do, we'll have to see, it can either be a one-on-one training, or if enough people are interested, we can do a group training. So that goes for all of the shoreline areas.
which I think is going to be really nice for people using. So I think we are done with stewardship grant program. Thank you, Paige. We did have some action items to cover, but they didn't make them into the packet. We'll make it next week, I believe, which would be nice. And so I'd like to turn it over then to Lauren for the attorney report.
Yes, this month we published notice for the public hearing for the rule amendment. So that ran June 13th and 20th in the Pioneer Press, and worked with Nicole on kind of outlining the deadlines and coordinating the comment period and all of that. So that's my report for you tonight.
That's a question, Lauren. We're still restricted to only physical print on reporting for public hearing. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, it depends on what the notice is. But yeah, with publication, if under the statute, like for the rule amendment statute, it requires publication, and publication is statutorily defined as 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper. So notice for like special meetings and things like that, we can just do at the building and on the website. But if it's in the statute that it has to be published, then that's when the newspaper is involved.
Has there been any movement on changing the definition of publication in that statute, out of curiosity?
Not that I've seen, and it seems so antiquated, doesn't it? But yeah, and I think the district just always also publishes it on their website. You know, the rule amendment notice of the public hearing was on the district website too.
Thinking like social media account, like a Facebook form. Did we do
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the most effective way to truly spread
yeah.
the
I
word.
mean, even Facebook's kind of getting antiquated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the. But yes, we put everything on the website.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's more easily available.
I don't have any questions. I was just curious. It's just
Mhm.
I appreciate the Pioneer Press and publishing it, but I don't think we're gonna get the same level of participation. Okay. Let's move to board discussion topics. I only had one thing that I wanted to bring up on the discussion topics. There's been some discussions about the CAC as the action item for the attorney report. I was curious, and this is just for getting some sense on if this is a good idea or good practice. Would it make some sense to hear or have additional reporting for what the CAC is hearing around the neighborhoods or around the areas come forward to the board as part of the summary? There is a summary provided. I believe Carrie provides the summary in the report.
For the meeting, yeah, those are meetings. So
Yeah.
it's based on the meetings.
But looking at like public discourse, I know the CAC is kind of a face to the community. Is there a way to summarize what they're hearing from the community for us to hear as well? I just wanted to get people's feedback. I was curious. Like, do they hear feedback from neighbors and whatnot?
Yeah, having been a member of CAC for some years, other than like Waterfest, where they have always had a presence and provide some outreach there. Other than maybe on just an individual kind of personalized basis, I'm not recalling that there were a number of occasions at least. So it's maybe a small number that wasn't significant in my memory.
Okay.
Where people are, gee, I heard something from a neighbor. It's been more activity type actions is what CAC has been.
Okay.
I think that there are maybe some evolution happening within CAC itself. And what we've had in the past is not necessarily a reflection of what it may become in the future. So I think that there's some opening for building it. I think that people are enthused and have expressed an interest in having a little better interaction with the board of managers. I think during the water planning process, I recall there was some request for CAC to provide some input.
Yeah.
And so in those kinds of instances, there's maybe the board requesting a little bit more interaction, and CAC I think is kind of asking for that as an opportunity.
And the reason
But that broader community, I don't know that that's necessarily been figured out. We probably get more of that. Sorry, one last thought. We get more of that through the education program.
we get a lot of it.
And a significant part of the representation within CAC has been a part of some of those people, those networks.
So the reason I was thinking about it recently is I've been having associates who have lake homes and questions. They bring up comments, but it's been a lull. It's been a lull for a really long time, and I'm good with that. There isn't a pressing need, and generally when there's a problem, you get a lot of squeaky wheels. And I'm not trying to invite those, but what I think is with these drought years, these down years, it's a good time to be proactive and think about things that can make an impact now, where we have some availability of resources, times. And so I was thinking, okay, well, Stephanie came a couple of times, voiced a lot of good feedback in one of the meetings, and is there a way to connect to the public in that way, using that venue? Was something I was thinking to take a more proactive stance on, oh, this culvert is covered, or that pipe is covered, or whatnot. That's what I was trying to think through. If y'all don't find it useful, I'm comfortable with that, but I like the idea. And not that I'm missing the CAC members coming here. They've always provided some interesting insights, but maybe asking them or bringing it to them. I think Ben, you're meeting with the CAC periodically. Like, do they want to nominate a liaison to come to the board?
So they have done that. Well, so they've put the meeting schedule up and asked the AC members to sign up. So it's
okay.
just based on their availability and
Kind of
rotation.
Yeah.
Rolling. So I think that there is that opportunity there, and then having been as the liaison from the board to them, maybe it's an opportunity for you in the meetings to say, are you hearing anything that I can bring back? Or
That would be
anything you
huge.
want to bring
Yeah.
back to the board.
there's always that opportunity, like I said, for them to come to this meeting. When I signed up for as the liaison, volunteered for that, I was not as familiar with as Mark was with the CAC, so that was kind of one of my thoughts, is they would actually be bringing more feedback and thoughts on some of the processes that we're involved in at this level. And I can definitely offer that at our next meeting. I think it's in September.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
I think
in a bit.
that seems like a natural progression.
it seems nice to keep at least them close. They do such good service with the
Yeah.
dealerships and all that.
Definitely think there can be more back and forth, and I think Ben can help with that, but also, like you said, having them come to meetings, or if there is something specifically we can add to the agenda each time they meet, that then would show up in the report, that kind of.
Or like
thing
have
back
a,
there.
say, hey, it'd be great if you guys came every 3 months. and
Yeah.
Just talk to us
Yeah.
about some things. I'm just,
Yeah.
I
we
like the
could
social
offer them
aspect here and
to speak to, not just come and listen.
well,
but
that's right,
to,
right.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's a
we'll
good
give you,
idea.
we'll give you a spot.
Yeah. The
That's,
other thing I wanted to mention real quick about that is Lauren, our communications specialist, is looking at, she's back. She's got a lot of good ideas. She's ready to go. But she's talking about doing some engagement with the broader community, looking at values and places of influence for both board and CAC. So she's looking at surveys and other means of collecting that information about water values around our communities. So
that would
that
be,
is something that I think would be helpful.
that'd be really awesome. I had a colleague who ran for public office and said there's some of those economically hit areas that are very difficult to reach.
Yeah.
And so finding out ways
Yeah.
of doing that,
Yeah.
especially as we consider the North Shore. It's summer, it's a good time to engage. That's why I figured I'd bring it up.
Yeah.
One last just additional thought, and I think this is something that Stephanie brought to CAC, and that's the Adopted Dream program. And I think that has some opportunity for, if you're out there, you're kind of checking the screen, and there might be somebody that you may not own that curb property. Somebody else might come on, well, what are you doing? And so there might be a little bit more interaction going forward from just that kind of a project.
Yeah, and I have asked, it's been on the action log for a little bit, asked Sage and Curie to provide an update. I know because that has been a discussion on this, for a few meetings, so
Yeah,
that should be coming.
that would be awesome to do as part of the summer. Okay. Thank you for entertaining that discussion point. I just wanted to figure out the way to engage nicely. So new reports and presentations, unless there's other topics that you wanted to bring up. Awesome. New reports or presentations, 2023 budget planning.
24, does it say 23?
It does, and I didn't mentally correct it.
Didn't catch it. 2024 budget discussions. I included the memo. It's real high level, not a lot of detail. You see a lot of detail next month, including a table, budget table, and then line by line description and discussion around each of the budget items. This is just trying to capture the bigger categories for you, so you can kind of start to hone in on what that will look like over the next couple of months. I don't necessarily need to walk through this unless you want me to. I know we have some newer members, so if you want me to do that, I can. Otherwise, if we want to go through any questions or comments.
I think my personal opinion is if y'all have questions or comments, it's probably the best way to engage.
Sure.
I found it helpful to kind of have it broken out by some of these categories. And I also appreciated the, I'll call them editorial kinds of expectations that, if you're not anticipating that there will be a change, or this has been in place for a long period of time, or, those kinds of things, I think it gives some context to some of these things, some of these topics. So I appreciate that.
I have maybe 3 or 4 things to ask about. The staffing benefits, I remember during the audit, there was a conversation around pension and some of the rewards based off inflation. I didn't know if that was something that we needed to revisit for next year. I can go back and find the audit page that was like, hey, this is the last time it was reviewed. Which I
So
thought
the
was a good
pension,
point.
we don't have any control over and it doesn't
Okay.
impact our budget. Well, it
Okay.
impacts our budget, but only from the state sets those
Understood.
percentages.
Okay.
So we account for the percentages and those haven't changed now for.
Okay, so maybe
a few
that was
years,
just a
but-
reference to the states that.
Yes, and so, and we
Okay,
have to,
Thank you.
we have to report our liabilities in our audit based on the pension, even though it doesn't impact our budget or.
And I'm still learning on how that works. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah.
Second question was on the street sweeping. I remember
Yeah.
in the report that was published or put out earlier in either the winter or in the spring, there was a sizable amount needed for if we were to purchase or assist in
Mhm.
purchasing.
Yeah.
This one seems like it might take some pre-work before we go in there. I was just curious, is there any need to bring it back to the board for discussion, or it'll just be included in the normal process?
It'll be, yeah, I'll include it in the process. That's something that I'm not sure 2024 will. Well, we'll have to, Paige and I will discuss what to include in the budget. and
This
then
one feels like
add
it
that
could really
information.
have an impact on the levy if we choose to go this direction based off the study.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, we're not really sure yet because we haven't gone through this pilot either to see how this year will
We
go.
didn't
So I'm
go
not
through
sure
it.
2024 will be when we would be purchasing
Okay.
or helping cities purchase necessarily, but.
Third question, I know we do work trying to get Bowser grants or other grants to do some of our own work around. Do we have plans for which grants we would go after next year? And is that an important part of the budgeting process that we should talk about?
Typically, how we've done it in the past is we budget fully for projects, and then if we get the grant,
It's upside.
it's upside.
Okay.
I mean, that is, there are, I guess, in some cases, there are some projects where we say we would only do this if we were to get the grant.
Yeah.
But typically, we'd say, are we committing to this project? Yes.
Okay.
And then we'd go for a
And then
grant.
we would shoot for the grant. after that.
Yeah, and the Bowser, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Bowser timeline for like clean water projects is we apply in August, is that correct?
We should be open pretty soon. Hoping late August.
Yeah, and then we don't find out until later in the year, so it's like, it's hard to schedule that.
Well, I didn't know if we had plans to apply for some of those. I know we've gone after them in the past, but been awarded them luckily in the past. So it's maybe curious about it when we think about budgets. Gosh, I apologize. Another wetland restoration project. There seems like there's more work to be done here before we set that particular budget. In terms of defining and looking at it, I think the last we had talked, Bar was going to go do some additional assessments, right? Are we going to get?
The wetland restoration assessment had been done. So that's what I said, we would bring back next month, so you could discuss that, because we haven't really discussed it. We just said, here's our.
Yeah, they gave us a few options and then they were going to go answer a couple other questions, I thought.
And aren't there funds already allocated?
Yeah, we've already levied for those funds.
Right.
So they're already there waiting for restoration projects.
Okay, so the report that we'll see next month in August, you don't anticipating having a meaningful impact on this particular budget line item?
Not for the budget, no.
For 2024.
There. It would just be whether or not you're ready to implement and spend those funds on projects. So you'll see the wetland restoration site search. We'll also share with you the restoration plans that have been done for Cottage Place, so you can see what that would look like. I think that will be the site of our pre-board meeting tour too.
That would be
just
cool.
so you can kind of get your eyes on that as well. So and see what that could be.
I have a question related to CIP, and CIP kind of laid out those several categories within that planning and funding source. And I remember a meeting or two back that I believe it was the Battle Creek project where we were considering the request for a larger amount of money. And I think that the comments were made that it was getting to the realm of size that it could have been something that would have maybe fit well under some of the CIP type projects. What's the process to kind of capture something like that in the future under CIP? How does that
I think
work?
what happens is, so, and actually both pots of money, so both the stewardship grant fund and the targeted retrofit projects all come under our CIP budget. So
Okay.
they have individual categories and funds that have to be used for those purposes. Now, the way that when we have target retrofit projects, those are projects we are seeking out. We are going and we're saying, this is a priority. We want to do a project here. Here's the benefit. And here's why. We contract out that project, we build it. Most of the time it is on somebody else's property, but we build it and have maintenance agreements and help with that maintenance as well. When they come through the stewardship grant, it's somebody else's idea and they want to implement the project. We support them with funds, but we don't manage the project. They do that. We've done a lot of school projects. In this case, Battle Creek was like, we want to do this project. Sure. And so they came through our stewardship grant instead of targeted retrofits. I think the point at the time was, if it had been a targeted retrofit project, you wouldn't have thought probably twice about the amount of funds that we were providing to do that project. But because it went through stewardship grant, it had different bounds, right, that we were looking at the time. But we've done a lot of projects with schools through our target retrofits, just came in that way instead. And in some cases, we might have it, maybe we're looking out a few years and maybe we thought Battle Creek would be in 2025 or so, like maybe there would have been there, but they wanted to do it sooner.
Yeah, and I guess maybe a little further, there may be projects where partners come to us and it fits best under the stewardship grant project,
right?
But it's kind of a phase one, and we may see an opportunity to do, this is a large area, it's maybe visible, it's in a priority geography location, and they may be interested, but it might be more effective, more efficient, not excluding them, but to kind of step in with a targeted retrofit that would more quickly advance some of their goals. And I don't know if there is a process to kind of have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens organically throughout the process.
So you and Paige and other staff members are kind of always sort of ears up and kind of thinking about.
I would say that's true. Paige, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think I'm following you, Mark. But yeah, so if somebody came to us, like Aldrich Arena is a prime example, that was a county project. They were interested in doing it, and we saw it was a great opportunity to get water quality treatment. So we ran that through the targeted retrofit program. For Battle Creek Middle School, for example, they were on a quick timeline. They wanted this to happen last year, and we already had projects allocated. So they didn't want to wait to go through our targeted retrofit program. In hindsight, they probably could have, but so that opportunity was given to them. So yes, I definitely think if something big comes up, we would look at it. Could we offer it through a different program?
And I think as part of, because a large amount of them come to the consent agenda. So when you read the consent agenda, like, oh, we should discuss it further, you just pop off the consent agenda and say, hey, this might be better in this way. I think that would be appropriate as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the Aldrich Arena is a good example because the county did come and say, we want to do something here, and we had a bigger vision for it than the county was, prepared to move forward with. So that is a good example where we did then take it under our wing. Ran it through.
Okay. Thank you.
And we have had, just one other piece, like a couple of churches, they already had a designer and a contractor on board. So we still ran that through our targeted retrofit program, just a little bit differently. So that has happened as well too, where we have a little bit more flexibility there.
Tina, under number 3, staffing and program support under salaries and benefits, what is the 5% benchmark against?
Normally that would say 3 to 5%, but looking at the salary survey and realizing that there's some bumps I need to do to get people into more desirable categories for their salary. That is, I just put in 5% overall.
Okay. So that's an average overall.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good catch. When I went back and read it, I assumed average, but it doesn't say that. explicitly.
Yeah.
I do have a question on, so I think one of the manufactured home areas, we had discussed property purchases potentially as a solution. Is that something that falls into one of the categories and I'm just not connecting it, or?
That would be under our flood risk reduction project. So that's, it won't be the next phase or the first phase, the purchasing. of
They're doing boards and communication, if I recall correctly, or,
For
sorry,
2024,
This is a
Owasso Basin.
for a North Star.
that's the one I'm thinking specifically. Is that one home that is well below the 100-year flood mark? And then,
Yeah, the next steps for that is we're gonna be meeting with North Star Estates to talk about, you know, the different elements as part of that project. This one is, it's a property management company for that. So it's not an individual parcel that we would purchase. But as part of those discussions, we would talk with North Star Estates about options for temporary relocating that mobile home or that residence, raising that pad, and then so that they can rent it out again, or talking about steps that they would have to take when that lease is up. And so those are the discussions that are gonna be happening now. Then that would, the outcome of that would inform.
hopefully the budget areas there. I know the flood risk reduction is a very healthy budget.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's more of, I don't know if that's going to become a norm as we consider manufactured homes typically built in areas that are kind of lower elevation. So I didn't know if that, but flood risk reduction, we can have that conversation.
Yeah, and like Brandon said, it wouldn't be purchasing for the manufactured homes. The area north of the homes, we've talked about.
Oh, that's right,
purchasing
on the
For
wall.
more storage,
Yeah.
but that's not in this first phase.
That's not in this first phase or the second
Or second
phase. It would be,
I thought we were
Green
just
instead of
going
removal.
against it. Yeah, okay. And then I bring this one up, but the Vadnais Lake, I know it's been on our action list for a while. I just want to ensure that we get an understanding of where that lake is at as we go into budget negotiation.
Yeah.
I guess it's just stressing, we should see that Vadnais Lake come through at some point. soon.
Yeah, Anna and I will be working on that shortly. And then I'll get some information from Blamo on their actions last year, and then
Okay.
As well as I don't anticipate a huge increase in our budget because of any
And
needs.
it'll go through the typical prioritization process.
Right,
I want to make sure
Yeah.
it's considered.
It'll also be included in our watershed management plan update. It'll be a big piece.
Good.
Under the topic of potential property acquisition, I think there was some mention of the governance
Mhm.
document, and that might have some play with regard to rationales for property. And
Yeah, there's two different action items I have. One is the governance manual and another is a policy on land acquisition and use.
Because I could envision if there were opportunities for like wetland restoration, that may also require some property acquisition. It may or may not.
I mean, typically, no, I'd say we would look for properties where we would partner. For instance, that cottage place is on City's Shoreview property and they've
That's city
agreed,
property.
to have us work with them on that site. So typically that, not necessarily, but it's potential. It's one of the categories.
Yeah, I appreciate on those action items, those few handfuls that could play a role in this discussion to be prioritized.
Yeah.
Works. Any other questions on the budget? This is going to be ongoing for the next 70 years.
Rest
So,
of the year,
um,
just the beginning.
Yeah, when again is the public hearing or,
September.
so there's one more meeting before
Yeah,
that.
so next month you'll see the budget table and the line by line item descriptions, and then you'll that budget, after any comments or any suggestions from the board, will go to our cities and also be noticed in the paper publication for the public hearing for the September meeting. And then I have to certify the preliminary levy to the counties by the end of the month.
that's what I seem to recall. And it was a preliminary and it could be changed if I remember correctly.
And it can go up or down in December, but I would say typically we
Try to,
go high in September.
yeah,
and
go.
that you don't want to
Go the
surprise them
Right.
with a big increase in December, but
Unless you want to hold another public hearing.
and you could, and that definitely, you do have to have another opportunity for the public to comment, but we have that at every meeting, so it's not a specific hearing. It's just opportunities for them to comment on the final budget. And we're not required to do truth and taxation, so different cities in the county.
And not having been through the process previously, I'm envisioning that the budget tables that we'll see next packet will show existing and any proposed changes.
That's correct. Yep, you'll see this year's budget, and then you'll see proposed for 2024, and then the change.
And then familiar with the state budgeting process, personally I am, and that's a 2-year budgeting. This is an annual every year.
Yeah.
What's nice is, I can't remember if it's in August or September, we look at the tax across the board. And
I do that in
September, that's what it is. For households, so
So the
put
impact.
things into perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget? Thank you for answering all the questions.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, second topic, Woodland Target Store Targeted Retrofit Scope Summary Update.
So this is a continuation of an existing project. Phase 1 included topographic survey, some concept designs, and then collection of soil borings, which actually were occurring today. So phase 1 is wrapping up. This scope summary includes the phase 1 tasks, but then adds to it the work for phase 2, which includes final design of water quality BMPs. In this case, in this location, it was 2 basins that were selected. And so final design of those basins would continue throughout the rest of this summer and into the end of the year with bidding. Come back to you with final design. If we get direction for bidding, bid the project in the spring with construction tentatively scheduled for next season.
I had program management nitpicks. Outside of that, I don't know.
What's that?
I had program management nitpicks, but outside of that, I had no other.
I have a very broad question regarding the target stormwater retrofits. I believe the target in St. Paul had some work done. The one in North St. Paul's had some work done. This is the target in Woodbury Valley Branch. There's another target. Is it in Oakdale or is that Lake Elm?
Outside, that's outside of
That's
that's
outside.
their last target, right, Paige?
Yeah, this is the third and final target in our district.
Must be close to the border.
Yeah,
though.
well, the Sharpie one, I mean, all.
They're so close. I do know that they Target, they've really appreciated working with us and are taking these initiatives elsewhere. They've already talked to, I know they're working with CAP region, and I know they've connected with bar staff that we've worked with them on our projects to look at other projects, or I think just around the state, but hopefully they take these around the country too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Again, I think you've told us that before.
All right, I'll tell you anything you want to hear.
The Vadnais one too is right across the board. I mean, they're right on.
Right, they're just close.
There's no action needed on that. That's just for your information.
It's helpful, thank you. My curiosity was like, why weren't the 100% plans and costs built into phase 1 versus phase 2? It's just a curiosity.
Oh, well, part of phase 1 is sitting down with Target, understanding what space there is available. We bring to them a couple of different concepts, different types of BMPs. And so depending on then what, in this case, Target is willing to partner with us on, affects the design effort needed to produce final plans and specs for a project like that. So that's why we phase it.
No, I'm happy with the phasing. I was just curious. A little itchy. All right. Any other questions on the targeted retrofit update? Okay. Let's go to the Coleman Lake Aquatic Plant Management Effects Study.
All right. So this one, the water quality in Coleman Lake over the last really several years has started to decline noticeably. And so with this project it's a bit of a study, a research project where we are monitoring Coleman Lake as kind of our experimental lake, and then also doing the same set of sampling, monitoring, surveying in Beaver Lake, kind of as a control where we haven't seen that decline in water quality. The purpose of the project is to identify recommendations for aquatic plant management coming out of this. That's our hypothesis, is it's that overly managing the aquatic vegetation has led to the decline. And so with this, we're looking at 2 water bodies, one where we're seeing the decline, one we're not. The work includes sampling, surveying, sediment coring, and then that work occurs over the spring. It's ongoing. That's seasonal work through the summer. Towards the fall, then when we have the data, there's modeling that goes into it, and then towards the end of the year, we'll be coming back with reporting and recommendations for lake management.
Could you help me understand why Beaver Lake was selected as control? Your curiosity. Is it a land area thing, or?
That's a great question. I don't know the specifics. I believe it's a similar water body, similar size lake, where so there's similar characteristics, but we're just not seeing the decline in water quality.
If when we do our first round of monitoring, if we find that the scales are very different, would we revisit that control out of curiosity, or is there?
Well, I think that it was chosen because it was
really close.
Yeah.
I get a little worried not worried. The control is really going to dictate, in my opinion, the delta response. And so I was just kind of curious if we find that the delta is like night and day football field apart, does that mean that it's really, really bad, or that we picked back control? And that's what I'm trying to differentiate. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
if like one measurement that we would anticipate to be similar was further far apart, is it because that measure indicates that one lake's performing worse than another, or that our control isn't adequately representing what we're trying to do?
I think that the best that we can, we're picking that control to provide that comparison, and the answer to that may not be known until we get
that's kind of what
all of the data back.
Okay.
Synthesize that this fall. And so we picked that lake kind of based on best available data at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
which we have a
makes
lot of,
sense.
and long-term data too, so.
I really want to understand just the rationale, but it made sense when I looked at the land area. I kind of got that, but
And we can ask Keith to comment on that further too, as he reports back to us.
Just look back in the June packet. I didn't look back further. The July packet includes coordinate locations for sediments on Helene, and I'm just curious. I think we may have had a map previously, but it'd be nice to have a map and not necessarily the coordinates, because I don't know where they are, but I could kind of have a little better sense
Absolutely.
from a map. Because it'd be nice to have some in the deeper portions, some in the near shore, you know, some depth profile differences. And I'm not sure if that was considered. I'm thinking it probably was, but
Yeah, I think it was, and I certainly appreciate the comment. We'll replace the coordinates with an aerial and
Sure.
some points. Absolutely.
I mean, maybe both, but
Sure.
Thank you.
And I had a subsequent question on, we did a review of Coleman Creek as well. I know this is focused on the lake, it's appropriately focused. Are we concerned about, because I think Coleman Creek's also impaired for other reasons, if I'm remembering my data correctly?
Coleman Creek itself, no.
Well, I can't remember. There's something about Coleman Creek in a recent assessment when we were doing, it was 2 months ago. I should have gone back and looked, but that,
Water quality report, you mean?
yeah, water quality report.
I don't think, I mean, maybe chloride, but that would be the only. I don't think it's impaired for anything.
Forgive me, I'll go back and double check. I was just curious, as we monitor for the lakes, is it important to also monitor the outflows of the
We
lake?
do.
Okay,
Well, so yeah, we monitor the outflow of the creek into the lake. So there's that
that's-
split monitoring station at the end of Coleman Creek before it gets into Coleman Lake. So we have that data.
that's what I'm calling too.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just.
And then we have in lake. Yep. So we
Okay,
have both.
will that be, I assume it'll be taken into consider here,
Yeah.
because if Coleman Creek starts really showing some signs of things, it'd
Yeah,
be
well,
nice to know.
it's lake because the significant changes in the creek that would impact the lake.
I need to go back and check. For some reason I wrote down something different.
Hmm.
That's my mistake. It could be a translation issue. Okay, so and Willow Creek too, we'll check. I think Willow Creek, Willow Creek's out, is that correct?
So
Am I
Willow,
getting
no,
that
the
right?
creek
Or is
is
Willow-
when the
it is-
after it comes into the.
Last question is, I believe you do this, Brandon, but I'm just gonna state it. You look at other monitor events, like huge storm events, that'll come into play also when you do your modeling and your assessments.
Yeah, the water balance is part of the inlet modeling.
Perfect, that's, I just wanted to double check. Okay. I just got a ton of questions today, I apologize, thank you. I am done.
No questions.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, let's transition to the administrative report, administrator's report.
Yeah, I have my meetings attended. It was a short turnaround between the two, and I was out for a little bit of it as well. So that information is there, as well as upcoming meetings. Just a note about the Metro Watersheds meeting that's held on July 18th. That'll be an online meeting. You're all welcome to attend. I won't be there. I'll be out of town, but Paige and Brandon will be presenting to the Metro Watershed Group on our flood risk reduction program. So it's a note, it's 7 to 9 on July 18th, if you're interested. And you'll get a notice probably from my other co-coordinator, Laura Jester, on that. So those are the quarterly meetings, the Metro Watersheds. As mentioned in the board action log update, I'm having some IT issues with my computer and some files. And so that is something when I get that recovered, and probably have to do some follow-up work on it, because I don't think they're going to get the most recent version. So I will send that to you when I have it. Metro Watersheds update. Then our manager Carp and I attended the summer tour. That was last week. Ben, do you want to say anything about the tour or any takeaways? Or
It was it's a good event to go to. Got to sit in on the, if I get this wrong, I apologize, Minnesota Association of Watershed Administrators meeting.
yes,
So that was interesting just to hear the different issues facing different parts of the state and how they correlate to us. There were some good education sessions. As stated, Paige had an update on our sweeping program. Some other speakers spoke on networking and just some other interesting topics, some guys from PTA and just kind of funding becoming available. So there's some good education sessions, and then just to go out on the tour the next day and see kind of the scale difference of, you know, our rural project versus what we do. It's very different yet the same. Just it was a good experience, and if anyone else has a chance to go, I definitely recommend it.
Need to block it off my calendar like a year in advance.
Yeah, so the summer tour is rotated around the state. It'll be held in Region 3, which is the metro region next year, so it'll be a lot easier to attend as well. This last week, it was held in what's called Region 2, which kind of wraps around. It's just not the north, so kind of the rest of the state besides the north and the metro. It was held in Albert Lee, and I think, like Ben said, it's interesting. Like, you have similar goals, but a lot of different ways of getting to those goals. But it's always interesting to find the commonalities as well as differences. And a good opportunity to network and talk with others.
And then Minnesota Watershed Annual Conference, I know we tried to go last time, but just hold your calendars in November.
Yep, I think
that
I
would
have
be
the
an
dates on
eye-opening
there under upcoming meetings that
28th and the 30th of November.
28th through the 30th. It's a really great event. That doesn't include the tour portion, but there's lots of education sessions as well as business meetings, and again, really good networking.
Where's that playing?
That's in Alexandria at Arrowwood. That's where it's held every year. It has been.
Mine is Mark, so I will drive. Interesting.
It will surely snow and be cold, but it's a great event. Staffing updates, you met our newest staff. It's been a lot of work over the last several months to bring people on board, but we're really excited to have, especially within the natural resources team, 3 really outstanding individuals. So looking forward to continuing to work with them as we move forward into the next seasons.
As I recall, the kind of calendar of or the tenure of their seasonal, they didn't necessarily overlap.
No.
So
Paul and Pat, yeah.
So
No.
they will come with different insights based on their experience, and hopefully chemistry builds great going forward.
I anticipate that for sure.
It's always nice to have people who know the watershed come back.
And have worked closely with our partners too, which is really helpful. Step right in there.
The only thing on the actions is just to talk about that land acquisition. Definitely should come back. I really am interested in the adopted drain, but if we need to bump that to talk about some of the other pieces, we can do that. The only other piece, I know we had the edible plants and restoration areas.
Yeah.
It was a good summary. If you haven't read why we choose why we choose the natural plants, what are the benefits, pros and cons of edible plants, meaning fruits, vegetables. It's a good read, but it'd be nice to understand when we should use it, especially if we're considering schools or other things. I can't remember what the recommendation was on those, but
Yeah,
I
it's more
think
like informational.
it was informational.
One of the things I just integrated in there recently is both, things that come out of our new technology reports.
Maybe that's a good place.
Having a way of better communicating to you, like, these ideas were considered in this way, maybe through stewardship grant, maybe through our projects, maybe through a special research, there's a lot of different ways we can implement the things that are being recommended. So
there's some places where apple trees might be nice with the other pollinators in the area, just as a side. So it'd be great to see it in the new technologies report. If there is a place to try it out.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions. Any comments or adds to the action board? I was a little interested. I don't know enough about seed mixes, and I apologize. It kind of all went over my head. Is that something that we need to formally say, hey, we recommend or develop a stance on? Out of curiosity. Like, generally, we want native plants. That's always been our stance. I'm comfortable with that.
Just try to be real prescriptive, because we don't want to we want to make sure it's a good mix. And I think, like, Mark said we can encourage things that we think are better than others. Now, if it were under like our stewardship grant, then we could be more prescriptive. Under rules, we try not to be like, you have to use this mix, but it has to be native, and there could be qualifications.
And I definitely don't want to
right?
dictate to use a mix, to be
Yeah.
transparent. What I'm interested in is what I heard in the conversation is that sometimes it's really good to use Bowser, sometimes it's okay and good to use MnDOT. I just don't know where that guidance is captured. And if we had to say, hey, refer to this when considering a mix or
I
something.
mean, I think staff would use their best judgment as they're discussing things with project or with
So the
project
discussion.
applicants. I think certainly on our own projects, that's something we can say.
choose, yeah.
We can say, no, we would use MnDOT, we would use other mixes.
So it's not a policy update, it's more of like, do we need a guidance on it? I was curious. And it's for discussion. I'm not adding it to the action plan. I'm just curious.
Well, I really appreciated Paul's insights that he having just been through kind of the process of the state agency, Bowser, and DOT, and probably DMR. Sitting down and talking about different mixes, and it seems like there has been, and there will continue to be a MnDOT spec and Bowser seed mixes as well. And Brandon, you can weigh in, and I pulled up the DOT seed mixes, and it looked pretty good.
Okay.
Having any changes necessarily, I think it's a decent mix. I'm just personally more familiar with the Bowser seed mixes, and I have a little bit more less familiarity, a little bit more kind of trust maybe. Bowser is just giving the seed mixes. I don't familiar, so I should personally work more on what those are.
I just wanted to make sure I paid enough respect to that topic, even though it's way beyond my understanding, and I apologize. Okay. So it sounds like things are good.
I mean, I would be interested to see. I'm not as familiar with the Bowser mix. Primarily, I'm familiar with the MnDOT mix, which is more prescriptive. It sounds like Bowser is more definitive. I'd just be interested to see the cost comparison and learn how familiar contractors are with Bowser seed mixes. I'd be interested.
I think there is definitely a conversation that we could invite somebody to give a presentation that at some point it might be worth. But yeah, Bowser's mixes do have some level of prescription based on species, but they try to target more plant communities. So whatever plant community you hope to be establishing in your restorations, that guides you to which seed mix would be likely to be best to use. There's also some geography breaking the state up a little bit north-south. I don't know that the DOT mixes have that geography component, and it seems, just looking at the one seed mix with DOT, it appears that they're trying to get things that will definitely grow, and are native, and so they come at it in a different approach.
Yeah, and when we typically would say we use like performance-based standards, right? So the end result needs to be this. And if you want to plant seedlings, if you want to plant shrubs, if you want to, use a seed mix, it just has to be here, right, to get to the end.
I just want to make sure we have, because at the end, it's about the outcome and planting in that area and making it nice. And I don't want to skip over, I know my hesitant to say. So.
No, I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I am as well. I just try to understand it should be an outcome focused based thing. I just don't know the difference. And it sounds like people are comfortable, so I'm happy with it. Perfect. Go ahead.
It seems this might be appropriate time. I've been giving some thought to whether it would make some sense to try to build a little better partnership awareness for with I think some of the native communities perspective within the watershed, and I know that there are parts of the watershed that have very high levels of spiritual interest, and there's been rumblings about different kinds of, like bringing daylight in parts of Phelan Creek, and what's the future of Sweet Hollow, and some of those kinds of things that it's probably a long-term vision. And I just don't know that maybe the district has interacted some.
Yeah.
Is there be value in kind of bringing that forward into a more focused kind of conversation that the board would have in future meetings?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It is something that has been a focus over the more recent future, or recent past, I should say. And we definitely could bring forward how we've been working with the indigenous populations or people in our area and organizations. So we have worked, and I'm not going to remember their name change now, but the Lower Phelan Creek Project. They've been a partner of ours for a number of years, and we have been involved with their leadership on the potential daylighting project, which in of itself is one project, but we, having the relationship with the organization has been really helpful. Sage has done a lot of work in schools that have higher populations of indigenous people as well, and it's going to be part of our DEI and equity programming as well. So there is a lot, I think, that we could maybe synthesize into some updates for you. I think it will also, as we move into our watershed management plan update, I think that's an important place to focus on that as well.
Can we add it to the action for future conversations? It doesn't have to be this year, because I think we start revisiting it next year, if I recall correctly.
That's correct. One of the things when we went through our website update, we talked real briefly about including a land acknowledgement on our website. That's not something at the time the board wanted to move forward with, but if that's something you're interested in discussing or wanting us to bring forward, we could do that as well. We did work with somebody to write up a
We
land
discussed
acknowledgement.
about it. Yeah, I just can't remember why we chose one thing. Okay, go back.
So that is another component of that.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and transition. I think we're done with the administrative report, Martina.
Yes.
Thank you so much. On the projects and program status reports. I know I have a couple of questions. It's more about like when things are coming back to us for us to see.
Sure.
Any I can go ahead and ask the Coleman Creek flood risk reduction study. I can't remember when that one's coming back to the board. You've updated the models itself for Coleman Creek drainage areas, and you're going to continue to look into it. But
Fall.
Is it fall? Okay.
Fall. There's been survey data collected around ECU pond, and then further downstream as well. We met with North St. Paul to review some system modifications that we had identified, and wanted to compare notes with city staff for areas that they have kind of been watching that could be potential options. We have a meeting with Maplewood on the calendar for next week, I think, to have a similar discussion.
Any big feedback points from those interactions to date?
With North St. Paul, it was we had identified about 3 or 4 options, building on what was previously presented in the resiliency study. They added another 3 or 4 to the list that we'll be looking at, some of which may fall into more of a regional BMP, which is what we're chasing, to remove homes from the floodplain. Others are more kind of incremental improvements at the time that redevelopment occurs. And so with this work, what we'll do is we'll plug it into our model, and we'll be able to comment on, well, this is that incremental benefit. Doesn't get us all the way there for what we're trying to achieve with this project, but it does provide a benefit. And when this parcel redevelops, we'll keep this in mind. So there'll be a couple of different options that we think come out of this feasibility study. To both we're hoping near term, but also long term too, to keep our eyes on.
That's really promising. Yeah. Small little improvements still add up over time, so it's nice. Next one is the shallow lake aeration study. I believe that's completed. We saw a slide update or an update for that one, but is that coming back to the board? And is it something that we should be considering more broadly as we enter discussions with budgets and
So we have
projects?
another year of monitoring this year. And then the final report will come at the end of the year, and then we'll consider that. for-
Am I recalling an interim report? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think you got a interim at some point.
Yeah, that's one I was curious about. Oh, yeah, the new technology mini case
Yeah.
report, that was interesting. Blue
Yeah,
roof.
blue roof.
Is that done? Let's remember, that's done in Australia, right? I went on a Google spree. I can't remember. Okay. It's like, oh, that's a really fascinating idea. I had not considered it.
Well, and I think it's what makes it more interesting for our specific geography is because of building codes and requirements for snow loads. There potentially could be quite a significantly less structural improvements needed to retrofit.
Because we were pulled all the snow. Yeah. No, it was just it's such a novel idea. I was sort of Googling if it does in residential homes at all. I am done. I do have a question about Sage's work. Does she post when those things are happening periodically? It's just the involvement that she gets interacting with the students, the community. It just seems like just a really rich experience. And I was curious if that was open for board members to assist with them or help with them.
I think certainly that you certainly could be involved in that. I know that because it's with the schools, you have to go through the schools, background checks, and things like that to be volunteers with the students. But yeah, certainly if you're interested in that, we can share that. We don't broadly,
Yeah, and we can talk offline then, because mainly I just remember how enriching coaching young kids are. It's just eye-opening the way they think and gives me energy. So thank you.
For sure. I think it's great.
I don't have any further questions. As always, I enjoyed Sage's response. And I read through Lauren's piece and interested in a couple of things there, but and then the CAC, I like Carrie's update on that work plan. I'd be very interested to see conversations of that if that's scheduled within the work plan, CAC.
The work plan.
It's each year, these time expertise several projects. So they help us in projects. Are there other ones that they're like asking to do more? That's what I was curious about.
Yeah, typically they would get added to this. Or be asked, Okay.
Cool. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Is the new technology case study with Blue Roofs coming back to us with more detail? I'm just interested to hear how that may or may not count towards, your storage capacity on site, since they can be designed for low flow and perhaps then could feed into some other BMPs who are infiltrating even more water over a longer period of time.
I wonder if it'd make a BMP more effective sometimes.
It could make, you're essentially throttling down, the flow going into the BMP. The way that our rules are written for BMPs is we look at essentially a storage volume below the outlet, and that's what we give credit for volume reduction. So from a water quality perspective and into our BMP, wouldn't get credit there. Where they would get credit, though, could be a BMP meeting rate control requirements. And so certainly depending on the site and the proportion of area that the building takes up, it could start to have a meaningful impact on rate control. There's certainly other aspects, considerations that applicants would have to consider when they choose which BMPs to select. And that gets back at Tina's comment, the rules being kind of performance-based, meaning we tell you, you have to be less than existing conditions for the 2, 10, and 100. But how you go about getting there, a basin, a blue roof, a swale, we leave that up to your discretion. And then we review it to make sure that it meets those performance thresholds. So maybe that was a long answer to say that, yeah, it could be applicable for some of our rules. We could certainly come back and provide a little bit more context on how an applicant might use that within, in the framework of our rules to comply with what we require.
I'd be interested to see that. It seems like a really great way. I'm familiar with them, but the work into how they fit into our rules would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I would certainly like to hear more about that. I was just thinking, are there applications potentially beyond rules? And I'm thinking pavement, parking lots in particular. We have porous pavement where we're infiltrating, but is there a way where you would have some kind of a matrix that would have porosity that would be kind of a gel? I'm looking at the picture, I kind of see this bluish, it's like it could kind of expand, be hydrated, prefer that term, following events, and then slowly release. So it doesn't have anything to do with topography, it's more with the bed within the pavement. I'm curious if anybody has tried to go that direction. So are there parallels under new technology to not just roofs, but
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, and you were talking, I was going through the packet here because there's actually a permit this month that's in the packet that we don't have the cross section for, but the applicant is proposing, because of site constraints, a surface basin that's over the top of an underground basin, and they've got different drainage areas routed to each. But the surface basin filters through filter media and then connects to the underground basin before it discharges out. And so, as you're talking about different medias and configurations below, in the ground, that's an example where applicants are starting to get creative because of site constraints are forcing kind of that combination of storing it above ground, filtering, connecting it to something underground.
Is there any chance we could see that detail and perhaps a piping diagram of the site? Just of my own curiosity.
Yeah. Yep. All right. I think we're at the end of this. Oh, we're have manager comments. We've already kind of peppered them through this meeting. Anything further? So it sounds like additional information on Blue would be awesome. It would be great to see. And new technologies, make sure that they're available to applicants also sounds like it'd be really good to see. But other than that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so motion.
Second. All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Oh,
Have a good
Paige
night.
moved inside.
Good
I figured
night.
you did before she moved inside.
It started raining. I can't believe it.
Oh.